Now, as of the time of recording this video, and probably as of the time you're watching this video, Pokemon has not yet announced a Pokemon Presents for Pokemon Day. But let's be real, there's gonna be a Pokemon Presents on Pokemon Day. There's always a Pokemon Presents, and last year we had a Pokemon Presents on Pokemon Day that announced a game that we still have yet to see any gameplay of whatsoever, despite the fact that it's apparently coming out this year for the original Nintendo Switch. That game is, of course, Pokemon Legends ZA, and I do think that that is going to be the main focus of this upcoming Pokemon Presents presentation. Now, I want to say right at the very beginning of today's video, this is a prediction video for the upcoming Pokemon Presents. This is not a video about my hopes and dreams for what I would like to see in this thing, because honestly, I feel like it's always better for these Pokemon Presents to go in with lower expectations. I've always felt like that. If you go back and watch any of my live reactions to any of the previous ones, I'm usually there in the chat trying to temper expectations, despite the fact that I'm usually the hype man waiting to see something crazy announced. But I do feel like because we don't really know anything about Pokemon Legends ZA, my assumption is this is going to be the major focus of this year's Pokemon Presents. Again, especially due to the fact that this game is coming out this year. So what exactly do I think we're going to see for Pokemon Legends ZA? Well, first and foremost, I definitely think we're going to, at the very least, get a release window for this game, but I'm actually going to make a hard prediction that we're going to get an exact release date announced for this game. I do think this game is actually coming earlier than people are expecting, though I do see a situation in which they might position this as the big holiday game for this year for the original Nintendo Switch, and I could absolutely see a world, though I don't think this is getting announced in the upcoming Presents, in which Nintendo maybe bundles the game with a Nintendo Switch Lite limited edition that looks like, you know, it has Zygarde on it or something, or it has like the map of Kalos, and then a bunch of people go out and buy that system, and then that ends up pushing Nintendo Switch, that original system, past that sales marker to then beat the PS2 as the best-selling video game system of all time. I do think Nintendo wants to hit that record, and I do think Pokemon, if any franchise is going to do it, could absolutely be the franchise to push them just past that finish line. But again, I want to reiterate that I do think this game is coming earlier than a lot of people are expecting. I don't think, even if they do end up having a holiday bundle, that it's actually releasing in the holiday season. I do think it's probably going to be a summer game. Like, I could see maybe June or July for Pokemon Legends ZA, and I definitely feel like we are getting an exact release date, not a window, but a date during this Pokemon Presents. I also absolutely think we're going to be seeing gameplay of this game. If we don't see gameplay of Legends ZA in some way, shape, or form in this Pokemon Presents, we're looking at way bigger issues. I feel like they have to show at this point what this game looks like, and I do think they probably learned their lesson after the Legends Arceus original trailers where you had Chinglings running around at 2 FPS, and after all the different bugs and issues that Scarlet and Violet had, they wanted to take their time with this one. They wanted to cook, and I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised by how this game actually looks despite being for the original Switch hardware. Now, that actually brings up another point that I've seen people debating, which is whether or not they are actually going to show the gameplay on an original Switch, or whether or not they're going to show the gameplay running on a Switch 2, and they're just going to say, like, running on the Nintendo Switch family of systems or something in the trailer. I don't think they're going to do that. I do think they're probably going to show it running on an original Switch, because it would be kind of weird to have a gameplay reveal for a game running on Switch 2 before we actually have the big Nintendo Switch 2 Direct that everyone's all excited about in early April. I think Game Freak would probably want to show what the game looks like running on Switch 2, but I do not think that's what we're going to see in the trailer. I think the gameplay we're going to see is running on the original Nintendo Switch. So other than the release date and seeing gameplay running on the Nintendo Switch hardware, what else do I think we're going to see in this trailer? Well, first and foremost, I definitely think we're going to get the starter reveals. Now, whether or not we end up looking at a situation similar to Legends Arceus, in which we had 3 different generations of starters available as starters, or we just end up getting the Kalos starters, and now all the Kalos starters have Mega Evolutions, we're going to have to wait and see, but I do think the starter reveal is going to happen in that trailer that we get during the Pokemon Presents. And I just mentioned that I feel like the Kalos starters are going to get Megas. I also feel like we're going to see at least 1 or 2 other Mega Evolutions teased for this game. I don't necessarily think we're going to physically see the Pokemon. I do think think it's going to be a situation in which you see the final form of the Pokemon, you see the Mega Evolution animation, and then it cuts to black or something, and then we end up getting another trailer or a full reveal for those Pokemon later on. But I do think the implication for upcoming Megas will be there. I do feel like a lot of the Megas this time around are probably going to be related to Kalos Pokemon. Obviously, Mega Evolution was introduced for the first time in X and Y, and so a lot of the Pokemon introduced in that generation did not get Mega Evolution. So now, since we're going back to Kalos, and since this is a cool Legends game, and of course we always have new forms of Pokemon in the Legends games, I do think we are going to get Mega Evolutions for a lot of the Kalos Mons. A couple in particular I'd really like to see. I think Mega Aegislash would be absolutely broken. As somebody who lived through the era of competitive VGC during X and Y and Mega Kangaskhan, I know how broken some of these Mega Pokemon can be, but I'm a huge sucker for Aegislash. I've always liked Aegislash, and I do think some type of Mega Evolution for that Pokemon could be really neat. Another one that I think honestly needs to happen, because I always feel bad for this Pokemon, is Furfrou. We already saw Furfrou, if I'm remembering correctly, teased as one of the Pokemon in that initial launch trailer for Legends ZA. So obviously Furfrou will be present in some capacity. I know Furfrou's kind of like a meme for people who complete their home Pokedexes and people who trade online. And so I do feel like having another game released in 2025 that allows you not only to catch Furfrou and all its different forms, but also makes Furfrou competitively viable and gives it a Mega Evolution could be really, really neat. And the other big one that I'm thinking of right now is, of course, Talonflame. People love Talonflame. We already have Mega Pidgeot. I think it would make sense for another regional bird to get a Mega Evolution, especially one as popular as Talonflame. And you guys know this if you're longtime fans of my channel. I've always had a Talonflame in every game that it's available. I've always nicknamed that thing Amy Adams. It's been on tons of my teams. And Talonflame is already such a good Pokemon, right? You give it Bulk Up, you give it Will-O-Wisp, you give it Flame Charge to boost its speed, and then when people try to attack you, even though your attack and defense has been boosted, you go in for a roost and you do that whole thing over again. Baby, we got a stew going. I want to see Mega Amy Adams in this Legends ZA trailer. But wait, I gotta bring this back because I don't want this to go too far into, again, my hopes for this Pokemon Presents. I want to try to keep these predictions reasonable. Now, I do genuinely believe that Aegislash, Furfrou, and Talonflame could all reasonably have Mega Evolution shown off in this thing because they are not as hype as the starters. I think starters getting new Mega Evolutions could absolutely be news on its own, whereas I don't necessarily think like Mega Talonflame or Mega Furfrou would light Twitter on fire. Now, with that being said, there is one big Pokemon that I think is going to have a Mega showcased or teased during this Pokemon Presents that I have not yet mentioned, and that is, of course, Zygarde. The game is called Legends ZA, for God's sakes. Of course, there's going to be something related to Zygarde in this game, and I really do feel like Zygarde getting a Mega would probably be the next major step, considering we already have, like, complete form, and what's the dog form, like 10% form of Zygarde or whatever. I feel like Zygarde cells are also going to come back in some capacity in this game. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be shown off in this trailer, but that's just something that I have as a prediction for Legends ZA. Again, even if it's not shown in the gameplay in any way, shape, or form, I do think Zygarde cells are coming back, and I do think the big new Mega that they're probably going to highlight in this trailer, and that we might even end up seeing in this trailer, is Mega Zygarde. And one last thing I want to mention specifically about Pokemon Legends ZA that I've seen a lot of debate around online is the idea of having regional Kalos forms for some newer Pokemon that maybe didn't exist at the time of X and Y, right? Like, I've seen people bring up the idea of maybe having Kalos versions of Pokemon that were introduced in Scarlet and Violet or in Sun and Moon, and maybe those Pokemon having new evolutions. I would love that. I loved all the regional Pokemon in Legends Arceus. I just always loved the idea of regional Pokemon in general. I've loved it ever since they were introduced back in Alola, and I do feel like there are a lot of really fun opportunities, and I'm actually gonna go on a limb and make an exact prediction about a specific regional Pokemon that I think we'll see in this presentation if we get confirmation of regionals in this new game. And that is specifically Fido. Fido is obviously the bread dog that got introduced in Scarlet and Violet. He didn't exist at the time of X and Y. I was honestly shocked when X and Y first came out that there wasn't a Pokemon based around baguettes. So I feel like we could maybe see a Kalos form of Fido, and then maybe it evolves into like a super, super long dog or something. It looks like a French baguette. It'd be super funny, and again, I do feel like that's exactly the type of Pokemon that we would see in some type of regional showcase during this Pokemon Presents. But while we're on the topic of discussing specific Pokemon reveals that I think could happen during this Presents, I also kind of want to move away from talking just about Legends ZA, because I do think there's going to be other stuff in this Pokemon Presents, and I do think one of the key focuses is going to be the Year of Eevee. Now, many of you might not have already seen this, but Pokemon Company put out a multitude of statements talking about how they consider this year to be the Year of Eevee. There's been new promo art for Eevee and the Eeveelutions. A lot of people have speculated we might get a new Eeveelution this year. Maybe we'll get that rumored flying type Eevee or a ghost Eevee, or maybe we'll finally just get a normal evolution for Eevee that's normal type. But I actually don't think it's going to be any of that. I think if we get anything new related to Eevee that's like a new form of Eevee or one of its evolutions, I actually think, considering the fact that Mega Evolutions are coming back in Legends ZA, this would be the perfect opportunity to give Megas to each of the Eeveelutions. And considering how closely Sylveon is tied to the X and Y generation, obviously being introduced there, being the way that they talked about fairy types for the first time, being a supremely popular Eeveelution, I feel like Mega Sylveon is another pretty safe bet if we end up seeing new Megas revealed at all during this Pokemon Presents. And regardless of whether or not we end up getting Megas for the Eeveelutions or whatever, I do think this Year of Eevee marketing push is going to be super prevalent throughout a lot of the reveals that we end up seeing during this Pokemon Presents, specifically the mobile game reveals. I mean, there are so many mobile games and so many things they could do in terms of Eevee and the evolutions for those games, right? We've got Pokemon TCG Pocket, we've got Pokemon Go, we've got Pokemon Unite, we've got Pokemon Cafe Remix, we got Pokemon Sleep, we got Pokemon Masters EX. I feel like I'm probably still forgetting one, but there are so many Pokemon games. I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if we see some type of like mobile game spin-off that focuses on Eevee, kind of the same way where we had like that Pokemon Magikarp Jump app or whatever. Maybe we'll get like some type of Eevee minigame thing or something. I don't really know, but I do know that in some way, shape, or form in one of those games, we're seeing something related to Eevee and the Eeveelutions. And actually, while we're on the topic of talking about those mobile game updates, because these are usually the least interesting part of these presentations, I do actually feel like we are going to see a relatively big update for Pokemon Unite, because some of you guys might have actually missed this. Apparently they added a new mode to the game, or they're adding a new mode to the game in China. It's like an auto battler, auto chess mode. I feel like they probably are testing it out there, but I would be shocked if that mode didn't carry over to North America in some way. So I do feel like they're going to show that during this Pokemon Presents, and then also reveal that it is going to be coming to the North American version of the game as well. Additionally, this upcoming weekend in LA is the Unova Tour, so I think there's probably going to be a focus on the Unova Tour stuff in Pokemon Go, because I think the week after, if I'm remembering correctly, that's when it goes out for everybody, and so I think there'll probably be a focus on that. They'll talk a little bit about the Unova stuff that's going to be added to Pokemon Go. I just genuinely want to know when they're finally going to add Mimikyu to the game. I don't think they're going to announce it here, but like, Pokemon, what are you doing? Niantic, get on that. Like, how is Mimikyu not in this game already? And then finally, in terms of the mobile game updates, I do think we're going to get a little glimpse of whatever the next set is going to be for Pokemon TCG Pocket as well. I do think maybe this is where the Year of Eevee is going to come into play in some way, shape, or form. I could see them maybe doing like a smaller expansion set similar to what we saw with Mythical Island, but maybe having it surrounding Eevee and the Eeveelutions. I know that seems kind of odd, because I think most, if not all, of the Eeveelutions and Eevee are already in TCG Pocket, but I do think some type of Eevee set would be a really cute way to have a smaller expansion for the game without actually introducing tons and tons more cards like they just did for Spacetime Smackdown. And now that I'm thinking about it more as I'm recording this video, I really do feel like an immersive Eevee EX card is like an inevitability at this point for Pokemon TCG Pocket. It might not be in this presentation, but it definitely is going to happen, at some point with the game. All right, so we've talked about the mobile game updates. We've talked about Pokemon Legends ZA. We talked about Mega Evolution. We talked about the Year of Eevee. What else could they possibly show during this Pokemon Presents? I already feel like that would be a pretty solid showcase of stuff, right? A lot of that stuff is much better than we've gotten in other Pokemon Presents. However, I still feel like there are a couple things they're sitting on. First off, correct me if I'm wrong, comment section. I'm pretty sure they already announced that they are doing a Team Rocket themed set for the actual real TCG this year. I feel like this would be a really good opportunity to drum up some hype for it, maybe showcase some of those cards, get some people excited for that Team Rocket set. I'm certainly excited for it. And the other thing I think they could do is maybe an update for Nintendo Switch Online. Now, I predicted this last year. My prediction didn't end up coming true, but looking at the Switch Online release for this month, the only thing we got so far, mind you, it's a really good game, but it's the only game we got, was Wario Land 4. I could totally see a situation in which maybe some of the smaller Pokemon spin-off games, maybe things like Pokemon Puzzle Challenge or the original Pokemon Pinball for the Game Boy NSO app, could maybe shadow drop on Pokemon Day. But before we get into my final prediction for this video, I do want to talk about some things that I absolutely think there is no chance of happening during this Pokemon Presents. First off, we are not getting anything about Gen 10, the next major generation of Pokemon. They are absolutely going to wait for next year. That's a momentous occasion, 10 full generations. Next year is the 30th anniversary of Pokemon. The Switch 2 will already be out, so they could talk about the next generation on the next generation of Nintendo. Like, it makes a lot of sense. I really don't think we're getting Gen 10 at all in this. Not even a teaser, no glimpse, no nothing, no acknowledgement whatsoever, no Gen 10. I feel the exact same way, despite the Unova tour in Pokemon Go, about Black and White remakes. I don't think there's any mention, any tease of Black and White remakes at all. I really think they're going to be waiting on those remakes. Again, I feel like they learned their lesson after Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and the feedback that they got about those games. I think it's going to be a while before we see remakes for Black and White, as much as I would love to see them. I love Gen 5, probably one of my favorite generations of Pokemon ever. I'm a sucker for the DS generation of Pokemon games, and Black and White 2 were just incredible. I would love nothing more than a Black and White 3 one day, but again, definitely not going to be happening during this Pokemon Presents. And the other thing that I think there is no chance of in this Pokemon Presents is a new Let's Go game. I cannot tell you how frequently I see in my comment section, I hope they announce Let's Go Johto. I hope they announce Let's Go Hoenn. Bruh, it's not happening for the original Switch right now. It's just, I love Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. You guys know this. If you watch my channel, I adore those games. Those are actually my favorite way to play Gen 1. And I would love nothing more than a Let's Go remake of a classic generation, but I really just don't think they're going to do it, especially not during a year they already have a major spin-off like the Legends games coming out, and especially not when next year is all going to be about the 30th anniversary and that next major generation. Maybe we will get a Let's Go game within the first year or two of Switch 2's life, but again, I don't think we're seeing anything Switch 2 related in this Pokemon Presents, and that means I don't think we're seeing anything related to Let's Go. But now that I've dashed all your hopes about the things we're definitely not seeing in this Presents, I want to end things with a slightly hopeful, maybe a little bit out there, bold prediction, but I'm going to make it anyway, because again, the stars are aligning. I'm thinking about what else could potentially come out this year that's Pokemon related that could also be on the original Switch that would not eat into something like a Legends ZA. And I was thinking a lot about a trend that Nintendo's done over the course of the Nintendo Switch's lifespan, and that is remastering and re-releasing GameCube games. We saw this with Pikmin 1, we saw this with Pikmin 2, we saw this with Metroid Prime Remastered, we saw this with Mario Sunshine and Mario 3D All-Stars. I adore the GameCube Pokemon games. Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness and Pokemon Coliseum are both absolutely fantastic experiences. I literally still have my original strategy guide for Pokemon Coliseum right over here. I would love for them to re-release those games on a modern platform, because I don't know if you've actually gone online and tried to get those games secondhand nowadays. They are crazy expensive. And while thankfully I still have my original disc copy of Pokemon Coliseum, I have never owned myself Pokemon XD, and I would love to experience that game. And actually, the stars are kind of aligning, because that game first came out in 2005. It is now 2025. We are fast approaching the 20th anniversary of Pokemon XD, and again, I feel like this trend of remastering and re-releasing GameCube games could potentially lead for some type of resurgence of the GameCube games on a modern console. And I think if they're gonna do it this year, because again, I think it would have to be this year to line up with the anniversary, I think they would have to announce it during this Pokemon Presents. So that's probably the craziest, most out there, off-the-wall prediction I'm gonna make during this video. Most of the other stuff I said I think is pretty tame, but let me know in the comment section if you think I am way off, or if there's anything that I missed in terms of predictions for the upcoming Pokemon Presents. Of course, as always, I will be live reacting to the presentation right here on the YouTube channel. I'm sure it's gonna be at some ungodly hour of the morning like these Pokemon Presents always are, but if you wanna make sure to catch my reaction to that live, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a like on this video if you liked anything I had to say. Thanks so much for listening, and I am absolutely looking forward to the upcoming Pokemon Presents. Like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Nakama!